76. The elite. It is a grimly ironic fact that the modern era is so thoroughly elitist. This does not mean that the medieval and Reformation eras were equalitarian. Rather, different motives governed men. Also, all men were equally destined to face Almighty God, a humbling and levelling fact. The governing faith or premise of a culture creates its own antithesis. Thus, when heaven is the goal of man, then the antithesis is hell, and the tension is between the redeemed and the reprobate. The goal of history determines its antithesis. In the modern era, the latent goal implicit in Locke, but given no place in his time, was the equalitarianism of the state of nature. With property made basic to civil order, and all men endowed by nature with a natural right to property, the logic of revolutions is to equalize wealth and property, or to socialize it by state seizure. Equality is then the great virtue, and, in the thinking of some, the sole virtue. Inequality then becomes the great evil, the source of all iniquity, and humanistic sermons by senators and editorial writers attack this evil and its adherents. The underside of the medieval world and of the Reformation and Counter-Reformation era was Satanism. As against the heaven-bound, the hell-bound revelled in their satanic masses, witches' covens, and occult practices. The underside of the modern era is its rampant elitism. Academicians, politicians, and socialites who publicly champion equalitarianism become, in private, the most intense elitists. Fashions and styles change rapidly in the modern era because the elite abandons them when the people, eager to imitate the elite, adopt them. No culture has perhaps ever had anything so popular in the way of antithesis as modern elitism. Resorts and spas loved by the elite are quickly abandoned when the would-be elite crowd into them. A key element in the modern elite is the homosexual, both male and female. The perversity of the homosexual nature revels in the transformation of values and in elitism. Thus, Victoria Sackville West, a lesbian married to a homosexual, was an elitist. In 1927, she, with others, journeyed through primitive areas on foot and by mule to the Anglo-Iranian oil company sites. Her reaction to its stores, cool, organised hospitals, schools and tennis courts was one of revulsion. She called it a hell of civilization. She was contemptuously sure that here was society, intrigues and gossip. One shuddered at the thought of it. There, too, were no doubt people who were her equals or superiors, an unforgivable offence. She described her manifesto as a hatred of democracy and the people. I wish education had never been introduced. The people should be as well fed and well housed as T.T. Coes, but no more articulate than that. She was, by her own account, a cruel person. This is not unusual. Victoria Sackville West showed more candour than most. Paul Johnson's The Intellectuals describes the same ugly qualities in this whole class of elitists. Lionel Abel cited their propensity for error on issues. Of the leftist elites and intellectuals, he said, "It has always been accusatory and almost always wrong. With all these errors behind it, the left has learned not even one lesson in modesty. In fact, nonsense is exalted to help denigrate all standards and values." Professor Harold Bloom holds that the only right way to read a text is to endeavour to misread it. For him, it is enough to be greatly mistaken to be greatly interesting. The British philosopher Peter Strawson, tells us that Descartes was a genius because he managed to be so wrong. According to Abel in a review of Gore's play, The House of Blue Leaves, in The Village Voice, April the 1st, 1986, Gordon Rogoff wrote, "There is something breathtakingly tonic about a play that almost never lets family and community values have a respectable moment. Abel calls this the confusion of values. This is a logical consequence of equalitarianism. It reduces virtue to a political levelling, and it makes its antithesis a sterile negation, mindless elitism. If equality is the god and virtue of a society, elitism as a covert anti-equalitarianism will flourish. It will not only flourish, but will also strike out against all values as a liberal version of atheism, the god in this case being equalitarian humanity. Even as Satan wars against heaven, so too the elitist wars against the equalitarian order. This warfare, however, is not a holy war for the city of God. It is a mindless war against everything." The young nihilist nobleman, Dmitry Pisarev, in the mid-1800s in Russia, held that whatever can be smashed ought to be smashed in bits. Only what can resist our blows is worthy to survive them. So let us strike out right and left. Whatever we can destroy is just rubbish. Henry Miller in the post-World War II era went further. He wanted a time of the assassins to destroy all civilization and literacy and, quote, restore, end quote, a world beyond good and evil, a world full of equality. All this comes out of the modern philosophical premises of Descartes, Locke, Hume, Kant, Hegel, Dewey, and others. Thinking scientific man ostensibly has the keys to the modern idea of heaven, or, for that matter, hell. As a paper published for Christian schools noted with respect to Auguste Rodin's sculpture, his famous doors, the gates of hell, were commissioned for a museum which was never built. As Carol Bomer wrote, "In the Middle Ages, sculptures like this showed Jesus Christ seated in judgment above the doors, but Rodin did not put a figure of Jesus Christ sitting in judgment on the gates of hell. Instead, he put the thinker. Rodin's thinker is the famous figure of a man deep in thought. Rodin was saying that man's mind is the only truth. He believed that only what man experiences through his senses is true. Man is sovereign, not God." Since Rodin's time a century ago, confidence in the thinker, the intellectual, or the scientist is gone. Even Rodin's thinkers seem to be confused, or at the least puzzled. The world of rational modern man professes equalitarianism while subverting it at every turn. Equality has been a sterile virtue, producing neither fraternity nor liberty. Equality in the modern world is a political virtue. It is state-imposed and state-punished and rewarded. Jean-Paul Sartre, as an existentialist, in his Being and Nothingness, effectually negated all values other than a purely personal, self-chosen value on the one hand, and a political value on the other. He tried to merge existentialism and Marxism. For him, in the personal domain, man could play existential God. In the political realm, he stressed responsibility, but his view of the responsible, ethical act meant something very different. Here, the good deed meant a political act of some kind. This had to be a socialist act because socialism, by rejecting God and the Church, was closer to existentialism. The moral antithesis of the modern world is equality versus elitism. It is a disguised antithesis because the intellectual, cultural, and political champions of equality are themselves the core group in the ranks of the elitists. They are like angels who work for God but revel in hell. Their world is an untenable one. Because an elite is by definition the choice or select part of any group, it is therefore superior to all the rest. An elite group, whether in Rome, Paris, New York, or anywhere else, does not subordinate itself to the common man, nor to the state, nor to any religious or moral requirements. It is alone all these things. Mao Zedong was suspicious of all artists because he recognized their elitism. In the modern era, the elite steadily weakened and severed all its ties with the church, and then, beginning with the French Revolution, with the state. Subsidies to the arts are commonly a form of keeping these cultural vultures in line. The closer affinity of the elite has been to those below them, where they are unchallenged. A 1930s musical film made note of this in a song about 42nd Street, New York, where the underworld can meet the elite, 42nd Street. It is not only the modern state that courts and subsidizes this self-designated elite. The corporate world does also, with heavy subsidies to avant-garde art. In neither case is the ploy very helpful. The elite are erosive of all order because they can endure submission to none. The modern state thus seeks allies where it has none.